Let's get started. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to GW Institute for Korean Studies, or GWIX. I'm Yeon-ho Kim, the Associate Director of GWIX here. Thank you for joining our Korea Policy Forum on the the COVID-19 pandemic and digital human rights in North Korea. Today's forum is co-sponsored with the East Asia National Resource Center at GW. As you know, during the COVID-19 pandemic, digital communications became more essential worldwide than ever for maintaining social distance. And this necessity prompted North Korea to intensify its digital surveillance and monitoring efforts. And that's what we're going to discuss today in a wide, very broad perspectives, I think. And we are so honored to have Ambassador Juliet Turner, the new Special Envoy on North Korean human rights issues, as the keynote speaker today. Ambassador Turner was sworn in as the U.S. Special Envoy for North Korean human rights issues on October 13, 2023, so last week. And I believe this is her first public event after she got sworn in. So we feel really honored for that. Ambassador Turner is globally recognized an expert in the area of human rights and democracy, and she has worked over the past 20 years to strengthen democratic institutions and promote human rights throughout the East Asia and Pacific region. And most recently, she served as the Office Director in the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor Office of East Asia and the Pacific at the State Department, and previously was the Director for Southeast Asia at the National Security Council. As a career civil service employee and former Presidential Management Fellow, Ambassador Turner has dedicated her career to advancing human rights around the world. She's a graduate of Pepperdine University and the University of Maryland. Without further ado, Ambassador Turner, the podium is yours.
Morning, everyone. I am very honored to be here today and would like to extend my thanks to GW's Institute for Korean Studies for hosting today's event. As Yeon-ho mentioned, I am 1 week into my job. The day after I was sworn in, I headed off to Seoul and just returned last night. So you'll also have to forgive me if I'm a little bit jet lagged still. But looking forward to the conversation today. This is, of course, a topic that is very important to the overall human rights movement in North Korea, but one that has been of personal interest to me for many years. So thank you again to GWIX for consistently offering opportunities for discussions like today's to talk about the human rights situation in North Korea. The human rights situation in North Korea remains among the most protracted human rights crises in the world. And the COVID-19 pandemic has allowed Kim Jong-un to further tighten his control over all aspects of life in the isolated country. Although the DPRK borders are slowly reopening, we can expect many of the measures instituted under COVID to remain, such as restrictions on unofficial trade, the new border walls, and repressive laws such as the Anti-Reactionary Thought Law, which limits North Koreans' access to information and ability to communicate with the outside world. In-person and digital surveillance and monitoring, as well as severe punishments for anyone accused of violating restrictions, serve to further the regime's goals of total control of information consumption in the country. As the DPRK human rights record continues to deteriorate, the links to the regime's human rights violations and abuses and its weapons program remains clear. Besides preventing people from speaking out about the diversion of resources because of severe restrictions on exercising freedom of expression, the regime relies on forced labor and the exploitation of workers domestically and overseas to generate revenue that sustains its power and allows it to develop its unlawful weapons of mass destruction and ballistic missiles program. The people of North Korea have suffered far too long under these abusive policies. As I stated in my confirmation hearing this summer, I will focus my efforts as special envoy on 5 key areas, one of which is the topic that we're discussing today. First, I plan to work with partners and allies, including the ROK. As many of you probably saw, I just spent the last 3 days meeting with government officials there, as well as members of civil society and the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights to talk about these very important issues. I hope these efforts and this coordination will help inject energy into international efforts to promote human rights and increase access to uncensored information in the DPRK. I look forward to continuing to build these partnerships with other allies and partners to help advance the dignity and the rights of people in the DPRK. As this event will discuss, increasing access to uncensored information in the DPRK will not be an easy task. The regime has passed a series of laws since December 2020 to curtail access to outside information. We need to develop new strategies for getting information into the North Korean people that considers these new challenges, but also opportunities, such as an increased use of cell phones in the DPRK in recent years. It is also important to look at the type of information that resonates most strongly with North Koreans, such as stories of North Koreans who have successfully created lives for themselves after escaping. Many of you will have heard me talk about my 3 kind of prongs of work in the information space, the first one being content curation. And with the increased number of North Koreans overseas, this provides us an opportunity to both amplify their voices, but also to allow them to share information or perspectives that are unique to people that have lived this experience firsthand. The second area of work is delivery mechanisms. And as I said, that's tied specifically to the use of new technologies, cell phones, and also development of new technologies that are being used globally to increase access to information in closed societies. I hope to see and hope to help facilitate connectedness across different environments so that activists working in the North Korean space can also be learning from and sharing best practices and tools with communities that are focused in other closed environments. I look forward to hearing more in today's discussion about other areas of work that people are focused on and what more we can do to reinvigorate the information space. In addition to working with partners and allies, second, I will seek to reinvigorate accountability efforts at the UN, especially now that we're at the 10-year mark of the Commission of Inquiry report. As many of you know, on August 17th, after a 5-year gap, the UN Security held an open session devoted to human rights abuses in the DPRK. Between 2014 and the last session in 2017, they were held annually. While holding this session was an accomplishment of itself, it's also now important to use that momentum to continue to push for change. I will also coordinate with like-minded governments to cooperate on areas such as access to information and advancing accountability for those responsible for human rights violations and abuses in the DPRK. Third, I will undertake efforts to urge the DPRK to respect human rights and fundamental freedoms. And this includes messaging directly to the North Korean regime, specifically on the repeal of the Anti-Reactionary Thought Law and other repressive laws that exist in the closed country. It's also important to identify areas in which the DPRK may be open to reform. For example, in September, the DPRK Supreme People's Assembly discussed as its top issue laws guaranteeing the rights of persons with disabilities, which may provide for an area for engagement on human rights issues. And I would be interested in hearing more people's thoughts on that, and hopefully in future discussions, we'll be able to look at those potential areas of opportunity. Fourth, I aim to have a victim-centered approach and will focus on support for and protection of the North Korean refugees around the world. I am gravely concerned by recent and credible reports that the PRC repatriated large numbers of North Koreans including as recently as last week. The State Department regularly raises such cases with the PRC and will continue to do so in the future, including in coordination with our partners. I will also work with other governments to emphasize that the principle of non-refoulement should be respected and that North Koreans who have fled should be afforded access to protections, including relocation to a third country when required. I have had the honor of welcoming many North Korean escapees to the United States over the years, and I am proud to call many of them my friends. These individuals overcame unimaginable odds in search of freedom and are now business owners, soldiers, civil service employees, and great Americans. I also had the opportunity to meet with many in Seoul last week, as I mentioned, including being able to visit a school for North Korean children and children born to North Korean mothers in China. It was really inspiring to be able to interact with these young kids who have overcome just unimaginable odds to get to where they are. Many of the kids that have been born in China had to learn Korean when they got to Korea, but are also now have big dreams of doing great things like becoming civil servants in the South Korean government. Or I had the opportunity to meet with one young man who told me that he wanted to become a magician to bring happiness to other people, which was very touching to just hear how motivated they were all to give back to their communities and to bring joy to other people. And fifth, I will engage with the Korean American community on the issue of divided families and do whatever I can to give them an opportunity to meet with their relatives in the DPRK. In order to do this, I will work closely with ROK officials. I will also work with Japan and other partners to press for the immediate resolution of the abductees issue. Earlier this week, the days are running together now, I did also have the opportunity to meet with family members of POWs, abductees, and detainees in Seoul. And it was very moving to hear their stories, but also inspiring to see their continued resilience and persistence in continuing to advocate for their loved ones. And I have made a commitment to do what I can to help address those issues as well. Thank you again for allowing me the honor to speak to you today. I am ready to take a few questions. So, Yunho.
I would encourage GW students and faculty to stand up and speak up. But
thank you. I'm Yujin Kim from Pyongyang, the News News correspondent here. And while you were in Seoul, you mentioned to the press that you have been talking with Chinese officials that they should abide by the rule of non-refoulement and then there should be no forced repatriation of North Korean refugees. So I wonder how you're going to continue those efforts and what were the reaction from Chinese government officials? Do they also recognize the seriousness of the issue?
So the US government has a long history of raising this issue with the PRC government. We have, of course, raised the most recent cases, including last week. In terms of their response, we normally don't share the diplomatic conversations that we're having.
Hi, I'm a student in GW, also a reporter from Radio Free Asia. My question is, what does State Department prioritize when it comes to funding for NGOs, et cetera, for sending more information to North Korea? And would you consider satellite as an option going forward?
So the State Department runs a competitive process for all of our solicitations. And so our priorities are typically listed in our solicitation. I think from my perspective, we look for programs that have innovative content production, but also looking to invest in innovative technologies that could include satellite distribution, but could also include a number of different tools that are available. But I also want to emphasize that we see a lot of value in continuing the older school techniques that have been used for decades that have been tried and true, and that includes the radio broadcasting.
Let me take one quick question from the virtual audience. So how will you work together with the EU and its member states, especially considering some EU member states have an underground presence in Pyongyang through their embassies?
I do plan to be in touch with the EU and their member states. We do regularly coordinate across the like-mindeds, including at the UN, where the EU is the pen holder on the annual UN resolution at the General Assembly, as well as at the Human Rights Council. I hope to get to Brussels soon in my role to have more conversations with the governments there. But there are lots of opportunities to collaborate, including if they're able to reopen their offices in Pyongyang. And I will be in touch with them to see how we can continue to advance these issues through those channels.
Hi, thank you, Ambassador Turner. I'm Celeste Arrington, professor here at George Washington. Politically within the US, I wonder if you could speak about how to promote awareness and support for North Korea human rights advocacy. What strategies do you have in mind for your tenure, and what are some of the challenges that lie ahead?
So one of my primary goals is to help make more defector testimonies available here in the United States. And that means looking for opportunities to speak alongside many of the refugees, escapees, and defectors that are here in the United States. We have a growing number here, many of whom are doing really amazing things. And I'd like to provide them with a platform to talk more about that. Similarly, the same kind of effort to help raise awareness, I think, is needed in Seoul. And so I will also continue to look for opportunities to do that with young South Korean students. When I was in Seoul earlier this week, I did do an event at Korea University with students, which was a great opportunity for me to also hear what a number of South Korean students were thinking about this topic. I also plan to do domestic travel to meet with Korean American communities. And while that is largely focused on the divided families issue, it also offers an opportunity to talk more broadly about the human rights situation in North Korea.
Hi, my name is Chris Ellison. I'm at the Institute for European, Russian, and Eurasian Studies. And my wife is from Seoul, and we go to visit my in-laws in the summers. And one of the things that I repeatedly hear from my family is that North Korean refugees who have resettled in the South are viewed as not very easily assimilated into Southern culture, that they don't follow the norms that are expected about studying or criminality or vagrancy or delinquency, and that whether this perception is accurate or not, it is a source of them being sort of separate, the way that East Germans still vote differently from West Germans 30 years later. Does your office deal with the rights of North Koreans living in the South and how to promote their civil equality and integration?
I think that's a great question. And I think this issue of North Koreans and their resettlement, not just in South Korea, but here in the US, as well as in other places around the world that accept North Korean refugees, is always a difficult transition. You're taking somebody out of an extremely repressive, highly censored, propaganda-filled environment and putting them in free and open democracies. I have seen a range of adjustments for different individuals. Some jump right in and adapt really quickly, and some it takes a little bit longer. And so it's hard to say as a whole what the community experience is like. I do think there's a little bit of a difference between young North Korean defectors and older generation defectors. The younger kids do seem to adapt more quickly. But I think a lot of that requires that we all, as a community, civil society, and governments, be investing in tools to help those individuals to acclimate more readily. And that includes, and something that my office will focus on, is also increasing the availability of English language opportunities as well as mainstreaming into schools. I did go to visit that alternative school while I was there, which for many of those kids is an important part of the adjustment process, but also getting them back into mainstream schools where they can build the relationships and networks that they need to succeed. For many of these individuals, investing in them is important because I always ask North Korean refugees when I meet them if they want to go home someday. And everyone that I've ever asked that question to always says yes. So these are the people that are going to take those skills and those tools and that investment that we're making in them right now back to their home communities and be government leaders, be educators, be doctors, be judges in their home communities someday. So rather than looking at and emphasizing the differences, I would encourage us all to be thinking about opportunities where we can help to prepare them for that future.
Again, it was our great pleasure to have you the keynote speaker for today's event. And please join me for thanking Ambassador Turner. Thank you.
So while we're all getting situated, let me join Yono in thanking Ambassador Turner for coming to speak here at GW today. It is a great honor to welcome you here to GWIX. We're going to shift gears a little bit for the next part of the program. As I mentioned already, my name is Celeste Arrington. I'm a part of the core faculty of GWIX. Here I teach in the political science department and am the director of Asian Studies, the Asian Studies program here at the George Washington University. So it's my great pleasure today to welcome our three speakers for this morning's panel. We're going to go in the order in which they're seated, and so beginning with Greg Scarlatio, he is the executive director. Many of you probably know him well, for the Committee for Human Rights in North Korea. And the next speaker will be Martin Williams, who's a senior fellow with the Stimson Center and has been working on the 38 North project. And finally, my colleague, Yono Kim, who is the Associate Research Professor of Practice and the Associate Director of GWIX here, and has done a lot of work to make today's event happen. So thank you.
And Jiun, we have Jiun.
And finally, our online, Jiun Kim, who's, I guess, behind me. She is joining us from afar today. And she is a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council at the Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security in the Indo-Pacific Initiative. And she has also published a very informative book about North Korea's hidden revolution and how information, as Ambassador Turner was talking about, flowing into North Korea may be transforming North Korean citizens' awareness of the outside world. Okay. So our plan today is to have our four panelists present for about 7 to 10 minutes each, and then we will open it up for questions and a broader discussion.
Celeste, thank you very much for the kind introduction. Ambassador Turner, hearty congratulations on your swearing in. I will take the liberty of speaking on behalf of everybody in this community. We're very happy that you're on the job and look forward to working with you. Information in North Korea, information control has been one of the critical tools imposed by the regime, employed by the regime to stay in power for so long, alongside coercion, control, surveillance, punishment, and of course, ideological indoctrination. When the COVID public health crisis began, at the very early stages, the North Korean regime dealt with COVID as a public health issue. And of course, then they did what North Korea does best. They politicized and weaponized COVID in order to crack down on those factors that threaten the regime's grip on power. Of course, information is one of those factors. So to this purpose, in December 2020, the North Korean regime implemented the Reactionary Ideology and Culture Rejection Act of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, otherwise known as the Anti-Reactionary Thought Law or the K-pop ban. The legislation criminalizes a wide range of acts, such as consuming, importing, distributing foreign radio broadcasts, recordings, videos, books, any other published materials unapproved by the regime, with particular reference to South Korean content produced by hostile countries. They do not name those hostile countries, and then any country. So basically, it means that distributing copies on a large scale, we don't know what a large scale is either, copies of Wuthering Heights or Dreiser's American Tragedy or The Catcher in the Rye or Dr. Seuss. Oh, wait, Dr. Seuss. Okay, so that is punishable by law, basically. So examples of punishment include up to 2 years of imprisonment and forced labor for any person who speaks, writes, or sings in the South Korean style, 5 to 10 years of imprisonment and forced labor for any person who illegally brings in or distributes movies, video recordings, compilations, and books of other countries, Article 30, up to 5 years of imprisonment and forced labor for those using electronic and radio communication equipment, such as televisions, radios, and computers. Again, the gravest penalties are assigned to the consumption and dissemination of South Korean content. In the case of distribution of such content on a large scale, the punishment can be death or lifetime imprisonment. So central to the law rests the regime's perceived threat of foreign information and media, defined as anti-regime and non-socialist culture. And this tells you that, well, there's no thing such as Kim Jong-unism yet, but Kim Jong-unism is nothing but a modern version of Kim Il-sungism. It's the same reluctance to receive any information from the outside world. On the other hand, it acknowledges somehow the importance of new technologies and new content coming into the country. So this law, in a very strange, bizarre kind of way, can serve as a performance measurement mechanism for the groups that endeavor to send information to North Korea. What do they fear? South Korean content, hostile country content, other countries' content. What else do they fear? They fear groups of people getting together to watch or share this content. Why? Perhaps because under COVID, due to social distancing, as all of you know, 집단 생활, group life, is very important to ideological indoctrination in North Korea. Because of social distancing, probably this was kind of sputtering and people were probably gathering in groups. They were gaining a certain degree of social cohesion, sharing information from the outside world, outside the control of the regime. And this is one of the things that they fear most. So basically, the gravity of perceived offenses pertaining to information from the outside world, that level of gravity has been elevated. If you look at Article 7, it says that people, irrespective of social class, will be punished. It's very interesting that they acknowledge the existence of classes. We've been talking about Songbun for a long time. Now, as you know, during a regular trial in North Korea, if you come from good Songbun, it's like having a clean criminal record here. There will be some leniency. However, what happens with this law is that it's almost brought up to the same level as an anti-supreme leader offense, with punishment regardless of what your Songbun is, with punishment going up as far as lifelong imprisonment or even the death penalty. So what does this tell us? That there are two sets of law in North Korea. So there are laws that basically codify rules of law and laws that codify rule by law. Laws that codify rule of law are exclusively for outside consumption. Oh yes, Michael Kirby, we know you're saying this, but have you read our Constitution? The people of North Korea do not read their Constitution. However, laws such as the Reactionary Ideology and Culture Rejection Act are meant to rule by law, running contrary to any and all human rights principles embedded in instruments that North Korea has ratified, including its own constitution. Does North Korea have, because you look at laws on paper first, right? Then you look at implementation capacity. Does North Korea have the capacity to implement laws? Oh, yes. When it comes to laws that codify rule by law, such as this act, Of course, they have the organization guidance department, they have the apparatchiks all the way down to the local level, the Iminban neighborhood watch unit. What about implementation effectiveness? Oh yeah, they're very effective. They come to your house, they pick you up, they take you to a camp. If you're lucky, you have a trial. What is the implementation capacity when it comes to laws that are in the books, such as North Korea's constitution, but are not implemented? Well, the same implementation capacity is there. What is not there is the willingness to implement. So when it comes to these laws that are meant to oppress the people of North Korea, running counter to human rights documents that North Korea has ratified, basically compliance implementation is zero. So again, if one goes through the actual law, you can come across a lot of interesting aspects. You'll see that everybody is expected to implement and inform on others. This goes all the way down to basically the local level. If you take a look at Chapter 2, and everyone is under an obligation to basically respect this culture, ideology, and culture rejection act. Of course, no surprise, this is a reflection of North Korea's cultural approach to its self-reliance. North Korea is all about purism. And this is a more sophisticated way of trying to repel information from the outside world. Martin Williams wrote a report with us 4 years ago, and Martin, you pointed out that they would use technology, new content, and new legislation, quasi-judicial punishment and judicial punishment in order to repel information coming in from the outside world. So again, lesson learned for us, I mean, in particular for organizations endeavoring to send information to North Korea, South Korean content, American content, content sent in by, well, hostile states as they name them, any foreign content is viewed as a threat by the North Korean regime. Accessing this content and sharing this content, organizing, achieving a certain degree of social cohesion centered on this information outside regime approval, it's something that the Kim Jong-un regime fears and regards as a fundamental threat to its stability and grip on power. Thank you. I hope I didn't go over.
Great. Thank you very much, Greg. Thank you, Martin, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good morning, and thank you all for coming, Ambassador Turner. Thanks for sort of kicking us off here, Greg, and talking about the law. I think the biggest thing that we've seen during the period of COVID in North Korea has been this overall jump in the level of control of North Korean people by the state. And this law and the, what was the other law? The Pyongyang Culture Rejection Act or something? Yeah. I think these two laws together are the latest steps in a fight that has been going on for a long time. Back in the 1990s, VHS tapes started coming into North Korea, and North Korea has really been trying to battle foreign information, free information, uncensored information coming in ever since then. When Kim Jong-un took power, there seemed to be a little bit of a lull in the battle against foreign information. We used to hear a lot about people being executed. And for the sort of middle part of the 2010s, a lot of those reports of execution seemed to stop. And that actually looked like things were getting better. At the time, the sort of conclusion that we had on that was that foreign information was now spreading so widely within the country that it was no longer a solution to put to death everybody that was caught with it, because everybody was accessing it. So it had gotten to this stage where death was not a deterrent anymore, and you couldn't sort of kill the entire population. I think what we've seen with this new law is that as the borders closed for COVID, and they initially closed for medical reasons because North Korea's medical system, there's no way it could have coped with an outbreak of COVID in the country. The leadership then saw that it was having a big effect on the flow of foreign information in. So this was a sort of added benefit that they then started to double down on. And what we've seen now is a resurgence of controls on foreign information. Reports of executions have returned. They're now becoming more common. And it looks like this is a sort of, the pendulum is swinging back towards very heavy information controls. Alongside the border, I think a lot of you know that we've seen the strengthening of this border. There's now a couple of border fences along most of the border with China. That means that it's now twice as difficult to get across because you have to find two sets of border guards that you want to bribe to get across. But something that is still possible. In the last few months, there's been sort of the first signs that some of the controls on the border might be easing, but it is still very, very harsh, especially compared to what there was before. But I think one of the bigger problems that we've seen on the border, and this is sort of coming into the digital realm, is the deployment of CCTV. CCTV cameras during COVID have started appearing along the border fence. A lot of the control posts now have CCTV. We don't know very much about it. If the images from these cameras are just coming down into the border control hut that they're mounted on, then they're just a sort of aid for the single soldier that's there. But if these cameras are networked, and if this video signal is going back somewhere, then it becomes a lot more problematic, because while you might be able to bribe soldiers at a border, you don't know who else is watching this. And I think, as with many things in North Korea, things like this are as much about controlling the people as they are about keeping an eye on the security services. So the cameras are there not just to prevent people from defecting, but also to prevent border guards from taking bribes. So this becomes a much bigger problem in terms of the northern border, because you can't bribe a CCTV camera. There's a lot of digital surveillance on the Chinese side of the border as well. So far in North Korea, we haven't seen anywhere near the same level of digital surveillance. I mean, even if you go to Seoul now, at most of the intersections, there are CCTV cameras. North Korea still isn't at that level. I think it's partly a logistical one. There needs to be electricity, there needs to be communications networks for all of that to happen. But it also talks, I think, a lot to the level of human level surveillance that still exists in North Korea. There is a vast network of security services and informants that watch a lot of what's going on in cities and neighborhoods. So cameras and things like that haven't come in at quite the same rate as they have in other countries. The timing for today's speech is a little bad for me, because I've been exploring digital surveillance in North Korea for the last couple of years, and we have a report coming out in a couple of months, and we are talking about, in particular areas, a big expansion in CCTV, but I don't want to talk about that today because the report's coming out soon, so watch out for that, but it's coming. I think when we look at this law, the law is definitely bleak and it's bad, but as Greg said, it can also be used as a way to sort of measure the success of some of the information freedom campaigns that are going on in North Korea. Because if you accept that, there needs to be, the law is only coming in because it's needing to outlaw something that's happening. They're not just making up these laws to try to prevent things that aren't happening at the moment. So if we read between the lines of the law, there's a couple of interesting things there. The first is that a lot of the focus of the law is on distributing content and on organizing viewing sessions for people. There's less focus on the individual consumption of content at home. The higher penalties are for distributing the content. And that, I think, again, talks to the how widespread foreign content is in North Korea now, is that rather than go after the individuals, they're going after the distributors. This is very similar to things like, the war on drugs that's happened. It's very similar to things like, in the past, people used to get prosecuted for downloading MP3s, and now that never happens anymore, but they go after the people that are distributing that, or streaming sports illegally over the internet, stuff like that. The focus is on the distributors because this is becoming a big problem. The other thing that's interesting for me is that there are fines in the law targeted at companies. And some of the fines are targeted at companies for not properly controlling internet connections. The internet is not widely available in North Korea, but some companies do have connections for official purposes. And some of the law is focused on fining companies that don't properly monitor their internet connections, which says to me that there is some level of company workers accessing internet connections for unofficial purposes, and the government's starting to pick up on that. So those two things can be kind of seen as a positive if we read between the lines. But one of the big problems that we're having with the border closure is the lack of defectors coming across. So this year I've been to Seoul a couple of times to talk to escapees. And, finding people that have come out in the last 1 or 2 years, especially people that know about the technical side of things, is very difficult to do. And I think that's going to get more difficult with time. So there's just a couple of other just notes on COVID and how kind of North Korea reacted in the digital realm. In a couple of areas, it was actually ahead of the rest of us. And that's kind of bizarrely because there are such large controls or movement of people around the country. It wasn't easy to just leave your hometown and go to university in Pyongyang, or to go listen to a lecture at a university. Like, essentially anybody in the US could have traveled here today for this, right? But in North Korea, that wouldn't be possible. So they'd already been rolling out things like distance education networks. So when we were all kind of scrambling, trying to figure out, can we do school classes over Zoom and things like that, the North Koreans already had a system going because of the controls they had. The other thing is video conferencing. Again, because of these controls, they sort of had their own video conferencing system. All of the telecommunications networks in North Korea are monitored. So, these types of video conferences would have been part of the surveillance system. But I think one of the things we're seeing with some of the testimony we get from defectors and through these new laws is that perhaps the domestic communications network isn't as tightly surveilled as we think it is. We're getting to the stage now where so many people have access to technology that you can no longer listen to every phone call that's made in North Korea. You can no longer read every text message. We've spoken to people that were experimenting with doing some hacking on the domestic network. I would have thought that was too risky, because I would have thought it was too easy to get caught and get monitored, get traced. But apparently these people were doing it. And as we saw with the law and these new prohibitions or these fines for monitoring internet use, obviously people have been using the internet connection to do things they're not meant to. So I think as technology marches forward, it has the ability to intensify control of the North Korean people, but in some areas, as we've seen in other societies, as the volume of digital information gets so great, it gets more easy to sort of hide stuff within that massive information as well.
Thank you very much, Martin. That gives us some great food for thought. I'd like to turn it now to Yono Kim.
Thank you, Celeste. Let me just focus on the cell phone usage in North Korea that has been going on even before the pandemic. Let's do a quick thought experiment. Imagine going a whole day without your cell phone. What would happen? Pretty much disruptive or even chaotic, right? Your kids will be screaming. Well, guess what? Many North Koreans face the same challenges. Take, for instance, a TV drama called 열성 독자, Avid Reader, aired on Korea Central TV. There's this factory manager who got addicted to a Korean chess game on his cell phone. He played this game at the dining table, even in bed, until he falls asleep. And if a father and husband is like that, it's needless to talk about their kids, right? So that's what's going on in North Korea. And when I started my research on cell phone usage in North Korea back in 2013, I was told that even by that time, cell phones become so popular that a young man without a cell phone could not even get a girlfriend. And even those without significant income were selling their assets to buy handsets, which cost more than several $100s at the time, to show off their own wealth, if you will, or for their children who wanted to bond with their cell phone using friends. I think parents would understand what I mean. You can't resist. You always, the winner is always your kids. So cell phones have become status symbols, signs of prosperity, and one of the most noticeable examples of conspicuous consumption in North Korea. It may sound ironic that the North Korean government allowed the general population to get access to mobile telecom services when the authoritarian regime heavily depends on surveillance of its own people to control the society and the information flow. However, the matter of fact is that there are no signs that the regime introduced cell phones as a means for reforming or opening up to outside world. Rather, cell phones are seen as expressions of the regime's confidence in its ability to control the society, as opposed to a sign of capitulation to market forces. So the regime managed the pace and scale of mobile telecom services in a very careful and measured way. As you know, North Koreans are denied internet access, international calls are blocked, and as Martin briefly discussed, calls and text messages, if not all, are closely monitored by the security agencies. And especially the watermarking system recently, I think at least several years ago, introduced, rejects any outside apps or media without government signatures of approval. And this policy also extends to the files you want to send on your cell phones or even Bluetooth. With all this, why would cell phone users do politically sensitive or inappropriate conversations on their cell phones, right? Probably complaining about officials taking bribes or alleged embezzlements would be fine. But criticisms about the supreme leader, Kim Jong-un, or the party, no way. That should be subject to harsh punishments. So pervasive government censorship made the cell phone users practice self-censorship to avoid any risk. Although careless youngsters may want to use the words like oppa they learned from watching Korean TV in their text messages. And I'm sure that this will cause a huge problem for their parents if the state security agencies detected that. Even with the strict constraints that I just described, cell phone has already become a lifeline for the merchants in the market. So the merchants can negotiate and determine quantities and prices of the products they want to trade, as well as shipping and delivery methods over the phone. So they can no longer compete in the market without cell phones. And in the combination with the private transportation services, 서비차, they call it 서비차, combination of word service and cha, meaning car in North Korea. These changes revolutionized the logistics in the market. So for example, they do have North Korean style UPS or FedEx services. They even have so-called so bullet motorcycle services. South Korean people would understand what that means. They have a really great that kind of parcel delivery services in South Korea. And unlike in the past, the new logistical system has made possible the sharing of information on the people and products moving around in real time. But as a North Korean joke has it, you have to bribe to move around. And corruption is undoubtedly rampant in North Korea. They say that freedom is now for sale, and you may want to purchase it. And the COVID-19 pandemic seems to have dramatically raised the cost of freedom, if you will, with the imposition of strict travel restrictions. Let me talk about a little bit brighter side here. Fortunately, at the beginning of the pandemic, North Koreans had a practical means of sending birthday or wedding gifts to their relatives living other provinces. North Koreans can transfer airtime or prepaid call minutes, and the recipient can in turn transfer the call minutes to other people or to professional airtime traders for money. So that means they treat call minutes for use on cell phones as a proxy for cash. So that's why I think North Korean people, they call the prepaid call minutes 전화돈, meaning phone money. Not surprisingly, phone money has emerged as a highly convenient tool for bribery. So for example, one of my interviewees said he's transferred his phone money to a military officer who oversaw his son at the base, so that the officer could use the phone money for celebrating his birthday. But in 2020, the government introduced restrictions on phone money transfers, citing concerns about misuse, so-called misuse of activities like giving out loans or generating income. Obviously, the professional airtime traders are making money from this trades, which deviated from its original purpose of simply recharging call minutes. If you watch the drama Crash Landing on You, was it in Korean? I forgot the Korean title, just the American English title. But Hyunbin and Son Ye-jin was there, and they tried to get out of North Korea, right? But they were caught by the Coast Guard, and they successfully bribed the officers. How? Do you remember? They gave the prepaid phone cards. That means the phone cards are greatly appreciated and valued by many people, especially those Coast Guards, looking for bribes from anybody. But unfortunately, as I described, in 2020, the government, they decided not to sell this prepaid phone cards. They realized, again, the phone cards are misused, so if you will, for other purposes than the original purposes they intended.
Thank you very much, Yono. Last but not least, we turn to our online panelists today,
Good
Jian.
morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And I'm joining the conversation here from Boston. And the previous speakers, including Ambassador Turner and my colleagues here, have covered basically everything that needs to be said about the groundworks of new technologies and information flow in North Korea since COVID-19 until present day. And so I'm going to skip a bunch of my remarks here and just go into basically some opportunities that I've identified along with my colleagues here, and just share some ideas on what civil society organizations and people in academia and policy could consider doing, developing, and perhaps implementing. And so as it's been well described, the COVID pandemic has introduced new challenges, but as well as opportunities for information flow into and out of North Korea. So as it's been stated earlier, lockdowns and border closures have affected traditional smuggling routes, including definitely including defection and rescue missions, but also with information smuggling routes. And so this really does underscore not only the need, but the urgency for more innovative digital methods of information dissemination for uncensored and unauthorized content for North Koreans living both inside and outside of North Korea, so overseas North Koreans. So these challenges, due to new domestic laws, new criminal codes, as well as social barriers that have been introduced since 2020 and thereafter, have really have led to two major challenges. Just to summarize what's been already stated. One is it's really affected the traditional land-based distribution routes for information dissemination efforts going into and out of North Korea. So a lot of the USB drives, a lot of the hardware being carried through networks of brokers into parts of North Korea. A lot of those networks, not all, but many have been challenged. And secondly, these enhanced measures of surveillance and censorship have correlated with an increase in less risky behavior related to information. So including, but certainly not limited to, areas of purchasing, possessing, watching, and circulating unauthorized content. So I've carried out many surveys and interviews since about 12 years ago, and then pretty much every 2 years since then. And especially amongst escapees who've left between 2019 and this year, there's a notable shift in people's, in general, behaviors and patterns when it comes to behaviors around information access. And so about 5 to 10 years ago, a lot of people would share that they would directly purchase content from the markets or from some black market seller of such content. Fast forward to now, during COVID and until present day, a lot of the purchases have decreased, and I've noted a lot of certainly less risky behaviors when it comes to acquisition of foreign content. I think these areas do lend itself to opportunities, and Martin has certainly outlined some of them, but I wanted to highlight 3 areas of opportunities. One, and these challenges directly lead to opportunities. So the dissemination efforts that have led to just a significant decrease in land-based smuggling routes lend itself to the urgency of not depending on land-based efforts, but much more sea-based, air-based, and certainly satellite-based efforts to distribute information into North Korea. The second major area of opportunities that I have noted along with my colleagues is that targeting North Korean citizens inside the country is certainly primary relevance, but also targeting overseas workers. These include laborers, factory workers, as well as embassy, as well as the civil service corps posted abroad, students studying abroad. There's a lot of North Koreans at any given point who are working or living overseas with the government's permission, many of whom have much easier, relatively speaking, easier access to the internet and foreign content. And so I'm just not forgetting that North Korean citizens overseas certainly do comprise a ripe target population for content. And, people have expressed, have certainly demonstrated a collective demand for such tailored content. And also the third category, the third opportunity bucket I wanted to highlight is, and Ambassador Turner spoke to this point in great detail, is the need to create and curate much more nuanced content and messaging that is led by North Korean people's demand. And so, and this doesn't mean to dismiss a lot of the traditional or much more kind of quote unquote old school methods of distribution and content that's been delivered, but just expanding on existing content strategies is certainly needed. And we note that need based on recent escapees' voices and sharing that there's a lot more demand of nuanced content. And so we can turn to, and in order to do so, rather than conjuring up really good ideas amongst ourselves, which is also a good place to start, we can certainly turn to North Korean escapees' opinions, especially people who have escaped recently. And as Martin's noted, the number of escapees arriving into South Korea and other third countries have dramatically decreased since 2016, and especially since 2020. But there are individuals who have escaped since then. And so turning to escapees' opinions, the opinions of those who have escaped as recent as possible serve as the best proxies for the voices of citizens who are inside North Korea still. And so given these 3 important and pretty obvious opportunity buckets, I wanted to share some ideas that I had about what civil society entities, especially those in this audience, online and in person, could consider. And so first thing, and I wanted to try to make these as concrete as possible. So one is to donate professional hours. And so donate professional hours to NGOs and individual actors, as well as small companies that are in this space of curating and creating content, as well as developing more digital methods of content distribution. And so more specifically, if one is an engineer, a computer engineer, security engineer, or if you're a designer, especially for digital designs, or you're in content marketing or advertising, website design, website optimization, search engine optimization, online advertising, all these skills are really important to not only create content, but to market it in such a way that speaks to a particular tailored audience. And so donating professional hours is a fantastic way to get more engaged if you are interested in getting more involved. Another second idea I wanted to share is to work closely with North Korean escapees who are directly or indirectly related in this field. And so by working closely, I refer to collaborating with North Korean escapees who are the experts in this field. They're the only ones with lived experiences in this context, as well as trying to distill a lot of the latest behaviors around procurement and consumption, especially those who have escaped recently. And the third idea relates to the second point, which is that I encourage, and I'm sure that my colleagues here will agree with me, to keep abreast of the evolving landscape of the ICT developments inside North Korea, both what the regime is doing as well as what the citizens are doing in attempt to circumvent or curtail the latest and greatest, I mean that sarcastically, the latest developments at the software, at the legal and the device level. This is key, not just because it's important to keep updated about the latest research, but more practically speaking, interventions that, especially in this sensitive and high-risk space, interventions that are based on outdated information or outdated research, no matter how well-intentioned those motivations behind the interventions may be, could inadvertently and actively put North Korean consumers in harm's way. So it's really important to read the latest reports and publications coming out from HRNK and the State Department, as well as Martin's reports, including the latest one that is coming in the next couple months, as well as Mr. Yeonho Kim's reports as well, mine too. The fourth idea I wanted to share is to help improve digital cybersecurity hygiene among North Korean escapees, North Korean citizens, activists, brokers, NGOs, religious organizations, especially churches that are involved, and basically anyone directly or peripherally involved in this space. As North Korea gets much more sophisticated, much more quickly in not only surveilling its citizens, but tracking and hacking and really just getting really involved in the people in this space at the digital level, it's really important that we try to reinforce our collective digital security. And so if you're in the cybersecurity space, it's really key to actively engage. I personally am working with some colleagues to develop hopefully a very accessible guide for the North Korean field and all the actors in it, including North Korean citizens, with enhancing our individual and collective digital cybersecurity hygiene. So just be on the lookout for that. Fifth is donating unused, or in other words, like brand new storage devices to organizations. There's been a lot of campaigns to donate your used devices, and it's a fantastic start, but I think it just creates a lot more work than necessary for organizations that are almost always cash strapped and resource strapped to process those. So 500 megabytes or even 1 terabyte micro SD chips donations of such. If you have some lying around, if you work at a company and there's just a plethora of such high storage devices that could be donated to organizations, I'm sure they will highly welcome them. And lastly, I wanted to share that this idea of advocating for internet access in North Korea for citizens as well as people living abroad, working and stationed abroad. I know this idea, a lot of people have discussed advocating for internet access for years. Some people think it's crazy, it's impossible. And while that may have been the case up until now, we know internet exists in North Korea for a small segment of the population, as well as for foreigners and other non-North Koreans working inside the country in a variety of capacities. And so just trying to extend that in one way or another, whether it's through a big company, through the latest satellite internet connection developments, or much smaller companies, I think it's really worth trying to advocate for such access in parts of the country. And eventually, hopefully the whole country will have access like you and I do. So I will leave my laundry list of wishful ideas there, and I'll turn it back to you, Celeste.
And I appreciate the sort of concrete suggestions that you offered. As I begin to collect questions from the audience and online, let me just take the chair's prerogative to ask one to Martin. You mentioned the gaps in the domestic, or potential gaps in the domestic surveillance system, which is largely human-based. And I wonder whether you have any evidence of automation or using AI to, say, track the use of words like oppa in texts from North Koreans.
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, first of all, so North Korea still has 2 cell phone networks, but they're both 3G networks. This is one of the other reasons why there is not so much real-time surveillance on what North Koreans are doing on their smartphones as well, because the 3G network is not fast enough to send continuous data from everybody's phones, for monitoring. But certainly one of the things that was included in the network when it was built was a system where phone calls and text messages and things could be monitored, but only up to a certain number of simultaneous calls and things like that. But that's definitely going on the cell phone network. Most North Koreans, when we ask them what they talk about over the phone or what they send in text messages, a lot of them weren't worried when I asked what about being monitored. The most common reply was, as long as you don't talk about controversial topics, then you have no worry about being monitored on the phone. But they did say that once you were on the radar, everything was monitored. And then outside of the phone networks, we have seen increasing research into things like AI into facial recognition. I think, and this report has some details of some of the research that's been going on, a lot of it at Kim Il-sung University, but at some other places, and also some deployments of the technology, which we're seeing. But still, I think it's on a relatively small scale because of the problems with the network and the electricity supply that's required for this to sort of be universal.
Thank you.
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah, go ahead, Yono. Yeah.
About the surveillance of cell phone calls. So one of my interviewees was a former security agent, and he said, although they could not monitor all the calls on cell phones in real time, they do have a system capability to transcribe all the voice calls and store it for 3 years. So they can go back if they detect a person did something politically wrong, and they can always look up the whole records, not only the contents, but when and to whom they talk to.
Thank you. I'd like to open it up for questions now.
So do we see parallels between China's Great Firewall and what North Korea have? Is North Korea learning from China's ICT?
Yes and no. North Korea itself has a lot of expertise in software development, but very little expertise in hardware development. So almost all the hardware that it uses comes from China. And a lot of that these days, you can buy something like a security camera, and the manufacturer will give a sort of software application that you can then customize and localize. So the North Koreans do that kind of thing. In terms of sort of internet access and the Great Firewall, I mean, North Korea almost has the ultimate firewall in that the connection is just not available at all. So there's nothing to censor. Foreigners that have visited North Korea can get internet access. You know, the North Korean telecom network is a two-tier network. The network for the local population and the network for like resident foreigners. Even though North Korea is connected through China, they actually, as foreigners, have more freedom on the North Korean network than they do on the Chinese networks. They can access a lot of sites that China blocks. But of course, the local population, which is what we're really interested in here, they have no access. And it's difficult for me to imagine. It would be great if North Korea starts to offer some internet access, but when so much of the state is built on indoctrination and is built on stories and is built on all of this information, which would be contradicted should even a small amount of internet access be available, it's difficult to see how you would even start to build a firewall that would keep out anything that could endanger, I think, the state and that sort of ruling system that there is at the moment. So I'm not holding my breath for anything like that.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to one of our online questions. The question is, can we expect an increase of information flowing into North Korea now that the country is gradually reopening its borders? And what evidence do you have so far for optimism in this sphere?
Well, certainly, that's a great question. We do need the political will and the resources to invest in information going into North Korea. We need a coherent approach to sending information into North Korea. What evidence do we have? I'm going back to the Reactionary Ideology and Culture Rejection Act. If you look at Article 26, it says that parents shall strengthen home discipline over their kids. What does this mean? Kids are watching stuff at home. Who buys the players and the micro SD cards? It's the parents, of course. Then a very interesting one, Prohibition, Article 22. Prohibition of viewing and distribution through confiscated goods. The guys at the Kukka Anjansong, the Ministry of Social Security, have an impound, and they keep the stuff over there. And of course, eventually, some of the cops come and say, oh, you know, my wife has been watching Dr. Cha Jong-suk, you know, the first 3 episodes. You have episodes 4, 5, and 6? Yeah, sure. Is episode 4, 5, and 6. So this is how widespread this is. If even the impound cops watch this content, and I wouldn't be surprised if they distributed it and made money out of it, because our guys back in the day in communist Romania did the same. So I think that the evidence is in this very law that information is getting into North Korea. New information, mobile information storage devices are getting into North Korea. The law is very detailed. It talks about the type of devices, going back to the text messaging story. And basically, this would be Article 24 of the law. How would North Korean kids know how to use South Korean, well, whether it's oppa or some other word or some acronyms? They don't get it from movies because those move fast. They get it from soap opera, from TV dramas, you know, people texting life stories, corporate tension, that kind of thing. So it means that this is truly widespread. Another interesting aspect, adult content and spreading superstition are bundled together in Article 29. So anyone bringing a Bible or a Quran or a Torah into North Korea will be punished for spreading superstition. If this is distributed to a large number of people, the punishment is death. So this gives you an idea of the type of content that's reaching the people of North Korea. So it's the very law and legislation that of North Korea that tells the story. We need to invest in this type of content. We need to invest in the storage devices that distribute this content, and we need to focus on content that stimulates social cohesion outside the control of the North Korean regime.
So I'm a treasurer for a small anti-human trafficking nonprofit, and we found that COVID drastically increased human trafficking just due to exacerbating the root causes of human trafficking, like financial instability. Have you guys found that human trafficking has increased through COVID-19, or has it decreased due to less defections occurring, whether it's talking about defectors in China being trafficked or within the country itself?
Sure. That's a great topic, and we are still in the process of assessing what happened under COVID. I don't think we have enough testimony. I don't think we have enough data. But what you said makes perfect sense. With the border tightly sealed, fewer people, well, 80% of them are women, 80% of those who go to China, and many of them, because they're so vulnerable, they have no protection. China treats them as illegal economic migrants and forcibly repatriates them to a place where they face a credible fear of persecution, North Korea. Because of that, they're victimized. They fall victim to, we know the story, you know it very well, human traffickers, online outfits, marriages with Chinese men in rural areas. So given the tight border and the border closures, one would assume that trafficking has declined. But on the other hand, one has to remember that there were a lot of North Koreans trapped in China during COVID, unable to get out of the country. Controls are very strict. They use biometrics. It's very hard to take public transportation. This makes it hard for the North Korean refugees in China, and also for the groups endeavoring to rescue North Korean refugees in China, whether faith-based groups or secular groups such as Link and others who endeavor to do this. So definitely should be at the top of our list of priorities.
He asks, with the increasing digitization of North Korea, what's the likelihood of employing more digital external information dissemination strategies, such as hacktivism, proxy servers, VPNs? If you could speak to some of the sort of newest, latest and greatest, as you said, technology opportunities there.
There are more options to employ more digital methods of distributing content into North Korea. But it's by no means at the level that it can be. And just because, like Martin said, the quote unquote firewall in North Korea is such that it's just not accessible. I mean, for average civil society actors. I'm not including government actors in this conversation for now. There have been attempts by individuals to hack North Korean government websites. So not government efforts, but individuals who are trying to hack into North Korean government websites and to compromise vulnerabilities that exist on the digital interface. So people have been tinkering, kind of white hat hacktivists, if you will, but nothing that I know of personally, and perhaps others can speak to this, at any sustainable or scalable level. What an interesting note to include here is, you know, the student brings up the idea of hacktivism. So there has been a growing number of instances where North Korean citizens who are trained hackers to do whatever the government says, whether they're assigned to the revenue generating side of work or hacking and gaining unauthorized access to infrastructure abroad, whoever they may be, they're very well trained. And there's a growing number of instances noted, and this is publicly available, that actually turned into a law in North Korea or a local Pyongyang law, which states that they prevent or they want to restrict or eliminate domestic hacking against government entities. So in other words, a lot of these highly trained cyber actors, North Koreans, they're hacking into North Korean government officials' accounts, individuals, for various reasons, because they're mad at them, it's for blackmail purposes or for whatever. And so there's actually hacking inside North Korea at the domestic level. And so while that doesn't lead to any specific external opportunity, I think keeping abreast of what's happening internally will shed some insight into how that could translate into external interventions.
I am Bev. I am a graduate student here at the Elliott School. Greg and Martin, you both mentioned how it seems that phone calls are being monitored and like recorded and like tagged for like certain controversial topics. Do the North Korean youth and populace have like slang terms to kind of avoid catching the notice of the government to talk about controversial topics?
As Martin said, one of the things they will tell you is that it's expensive and you know as well, it's expensive to possess a cell phone, and basically the cost of use is also very high. So the first thing they will tell you is, why would I talk politics on a cell phone? It makes no sense. That'll get me busted. Why spend all that money? Is it, business, in particular family, and so on and so forth. Do they have slang? Most certainly they do have slang. It's a question I've never asked, quite frankly, but well, probably they do. I'll keep it in mind. We'll ask moving forward. I could actually get back to you very soon. I could ask some of my younger North Korean colleagues, former North Korean colleagues, but if you are from a country where you're subjected to surveillance, I was born and raised in communist Romania, every time I pick up the phone, in the back of my head, I'm aware that somebody's probably listening. Well, probably I'm right. So, of course, they do have this painful awareness that especially communication via cell phones is monitored. I wouldn't be surprised if that were the case. I promise to get back to you.
One quick thing.
Yeah.
You have to think about how expensive the call minutes are in North Korea. So the basic charges are very low, and they get 200 minutes per month. But 200 minutes, if you're a teenager, you can use it up in a day, right? Or in an hour. And then you have to buy this very expensive prepaid phone card. So you have to be very, very careful about what you're going to do with this limited amount of call minutes.
Thank you. I think for the last question, we're going to turn to an online question. This comes from a PhD candidate in the UK. They're asking about the effect of COVID on communications between escapees on the outside with their family members back in North Korea. Do you have any evidence that the border closures and controls with state surveillance have affected families' communications? And I think this gets back to a priority of Ambassador Turner's about separated families.
A lot of the communications from within North Korea to outside of North Korea happens in the border area on the Chinese cell phone networks. So the Chinese signals leak into the country, and there are folks in North Korea that have Chinese cell phones with Chinese SIM cards. So they can call and do WeChat and things like that across the Chinese network without the fear of too much state monitoring on the North Korean side, and without the need to go very close to the border. Everyone sort of seems to have their favorite spot to do it. People will tell you that it's better to go out into a rural area where there's less detection systems around. Also, some people will, try to do it at certain times of day or keep calls to within 2 minutes to prevent detection, because the North Koreans are actively looking for people using these Chinese phones. So the border closure in itself, I don't think will have stopped these calls. But what it could have done is perhaps stopped some of the transfers that come across the border. There were physical transfers and things like that, rather than stuff that was flowing electronically or digitally. One other thing I wanted to say, which is actually a plug for something, because I didn't realize it was coming out right now, but I think it would be interesting for everyone in this context. We just put up on 38 North a new article which talks about a new satellite communication system that should be coming online in the next couple of years. And these new satellites are able to send a 4G or 5G signal direct to a cell phone. You don't even need special support in the cell phone. So all of the cell phones that you have in your pockets right now will work with these new satellites. They're primarily being used to provide coverage to remote areas in places like the US. But the article we did today sort of explores what this might mean for North Korea. If this technology can be used, then it would mean that these telephone calls that at the moment are restricted to a few kilometers from the northern border could actually take place anywhere within the country. Look at the story, because there's a lot of reasons why it won't immediately work, but I'm actually quite excited about the possibilities for a technology like this. So I just wanted to mention it as it was relevant to our conversation.
Thank you very much.
Add one quick addition to this.
Ian, go ahead.
Okay, so in response to this question about how COVID affected inter-border conversations, I carried out a 170-person survey in 2021, 170 North Korean escapee survey about the humanitarian situation in during COVID in North Korea. And the condition to be eligible to participate in this survey was that they communicated with family inside North Korea at least twice a year prior to 2020 or 2021. And so there were a lot of conversations about this specific question. How did COVID up until 2021 affect their communication with family inside North Korea? And then I did a follow-up very recently with the majority of that same pool. How has it and did these changes sustain itself or not? And the obvious response that I got from the super majority of the 170 respondents was it affected it. And the main reason, in addition to what Martin said, the main reason that was stated in the survey was that because the domestic travel within North Korea was so constrained, even more than before, most people were shuttered in their homes, if not, in their village areas, and certainly could not easily travel near to the border to make these calls to China. They just physically couldn't get to a space that can even access the Chinese cellular network. And there were a slew of other details to this, but that was the primary stated reason for how COVID in detail affected inter-border communications with their families. And I do note that that is changing slowly, but yeah, that was a finding from a pretty large survey.
For the sake of time, I'm going to have to cut it off here. I apologize. We could continue this fascinating conversation further, but I wanted to say, Martin ended on a bit of an optimistic note, and I think Jian, you also gave us a bit of optimism, cautious optimism, in terms of communicating and increasing information flows into North Korea. So please continue to watch or take a look at the reports that have been mentioned here, and continue to promote awareness of the information blockades that the North Korean regime imposes. So please join me in thanking our panelists today, and thank you all for coming.